Today on Carebrock Farms, we're going to talk about spring inspections. Spring is an incredibly busy time of year for a beekeeper. Keep in mind, we've just finished unwrapping. It's been about 2 weeks since we did a treatment, and this is roughly the time where we want to start to go into the hive and see what exactly is going on. Using formic acid means that we may have killed any of the queens that survived. Any of the supplies that they've had for the past little while are now just beginning to dwindle, and we want to now get into the hive just a little bit before spring flow, that is, the nectar flow comes in, so that we can make sure that everything is in great condition so that when all of the trees and all of the flowers start to bloom and the nectar begins to flow, we start raking in that honey. Let's watch. So this is a particular obstinate hive that we are going to inspect. We're going to take its top cover off in a moment, but first I need to get my smoker. So I have my smoker in hand. I'm going to smoke the bottom and top entrances, just to let the bees know I'm here. My little way of saying hello. I'm going to pry up the lid. Set off to the side, upside down, so I can use it later if I need to. Take up my hive tool. With a prying motion, I'm going to go for the corners of each of the inner cover. Sometimes the lid is a little stuck, and you can use your fist in order to bump up underneath it in order to get at it. There we go. Now there goes the inner cover. It's got an ant infection, so I'm going to take care of that with my hive tool. Set that off to the side. This particular box has a super on top, so we are going to do a quick check of the frames in the super, but I can see there's not a lot of activity up there and there's not a lot of bees. Don't put any of the frames back the wrong way. They do have a scent pattern to them. And if this box did have honey, we would want to check every single frame. And there we are. Next, again, at the corners with the prying motion, we're going to pick up the super, set off to the side. I like to set on top of the the lid that we picked up previously. And next, we're going to, also using a prying motion, the next thing we're going to do is take up the queen excluder. Now, the queen excluder, you want to be a little bit careful. The queen is obviously going to be underneath it, but where she is, you don't know yet. So, number one, put some smoke down. That would mean that if the queen is underneath the queen excluder, she is going down. But in any case, once you have pried up your queen excluder, do yourself a favor and check it. Last thing you want is to trap the queen up in the super. Now this particular box has been recently treated with formic acid. We're going to pry up those pads, shake off any bees that are still attached, and we're going to toss them to the side. We're going to put them in the garbage in a little bit, but they will decompose outside over time. Next thing you want to do is take up at least one of the frames. You want to make sure that frame doesn't have any brood on it. I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. This particular box, like I said, is obstinate, and it has used propolis in order to glue everything down. They are famous for that in my yard. prying motion. I'm going to pry on either end in order to break the bonds. I think I'm going to be going for frame 2 in this case. Frame 1 was the one closest to my side of the box. Frame 2 is the next closest. I'm going to cut some burr comb that has accumulated, trying to free this particular frame. Again, I'm going to use a pry motion on the other end as well. It's tightly in there. As you can see, I've freed it, but it's still kind of stuck. So, with the grip on one end, I use the J tool on the other. It's going to let me pry up this particular frame. And the first thing I'm going to do is start looking at what's on the frame. This frame only has honey on it. It's got some stores. That's about it. Here, you can take a look too. Just a little bit of honey. We're just going to take that frame and leave it off to the side. If that frame had brood on it, we would not leave it to the side. We would pick up the other frame that's inside and check it. We want to leave frames with honey on the outside and frames with brood on the inside. We also want to keep track of the order in which the frames are in the box. So we're going to pull this frame out. We're taking a look and we're looking for the queen or evidence of her. What we can see here is a little bit of brood. These are capped brood. That means the queen was on there. She laid some eggs. Here I am blowing on the bees in order to get them to move. I'm just trying to see if I can find the queen. If there were eggs, as in little white things at the bottom of the cells, that's a good indication the queen is there, but I don't see any cells that only have eggs in them, so I'm going to move that frame to the number 2 position. And I'm going to pick up the next frame. Notice the J tool is able to use it as a pry bar in order to get frames up. This one's got a lot of bees on it. So I'm looking at it first off camera just to make sure that I can find the queen on it. This one has lots of brood on it. She is laying, and if you look very, very closely, there were some eggs. They're starting to form a queen cup there on the end. If we can find the queen, we're going to take care of that queen cup. It is in the upper left of your frame. By taking care of it, we rip it open. That's the start of a swarm cell. Them getting ready to move elsewhere. One last look for the queen. Don't see her. It's going to get slid into the number 3 position. Out comes the hive tool. At this point, I am concerned I haven't found the queen. I have found evidence of her. I haven't found her quite yet. There is a bee crawling on my bottom there. And my student is going to try to help me find the queen. There she is. Discussing brood patterns at this point. This box actually belongs to him. My students keep bees at my yard, especially if they don't have room at their own homes to do so. Next, we're checking the next set of frames. Again, prying and lifting. This motion, by the way, lifting the frame above your head, useful for two reasons. Number one is a stretch. If you're working close to the ground, it's nice to stretch up every so often. Number two, the queen is light phobic. She does not want to be in the light if at all possible. For this particular box, we never did find the queen. We found evidence of her. There's a lot of brood. There's a lot of eggs. Not a whole lot of honey. Maybe 2 or 3 frames worth of honey. This box is in pretty good condition. We'll come back later in order to cut up any of the queen cells they have created. Swarm cells that they've created. This is about the 5th or 6th box we've inspected this day, so I'm starting to get a little tired. We're doing our best. We're going to be looking at, we're going to try to look at every single frame that we can in this box. Again, we're not just looking for the queen. We're looking for the overall health of this colony. That's determined by the brood pattern. We want to see something that looks like a football on that rectangular frame of brood. Spotty brood pattern means that the queen might be in trouble. No brood in the box is an indication that the hive is queenless. And in this inspection, not this particular hive, but other hives we looked at were queenless. So we requeened them. We're going to talk about that next week. A little bit of smoke. Sorry, I'm still in the shot. You get to see my butt. Picking up the last frame here. Nope, it looks like we're close enough. This means we're pushing every frame as close to one another as we can. We're going to space them out so we can fit in that one last one in number 2 spot. My student doesn't like to have burr comb, so he is getting rid of it. To each your own. Burr comb is the comb that sits on top of the frame. It's excess comb that the bees decide to make. Now that last frame, the one we had trouble opening the first time, we are going to also pick it up and inspect it. But I kind of know what's going on with it anyway. one side is used and the other side is not. Now check this out. We're going to lift it up. See how one side is basically nothing on it? The other side is well drawn out. In that case, we're just going to flip that frame backwards. I'll cheese them off a little bit, but not too much. I'll get over it. And they'll be able to make use of the other side of that particular frame. That's kind of why we're doing that. Next, we pick up the frame that we took out in the first place. My student is helpfully giving me a little bit more room to work. Now, it's tight fitting. So we're pushing that down pretty hard. And it wasn't going to go on the other side. You can see the pallet that it's on starting to bend. That, by the way, was the wrong move. Spray them with smoke. Instead, we're going to take the frame up. If there's any excess on the ends of the frame, we're going to take that up. And we're going to try again. We're going to try to push the rest of the frames together in a moment, just giving them a few seconds in order to calm down. I never pretend to be perfect. I've just pushed the box off to the side. Has not been helpful. There we go. Now that we've created a little bit more space, we're going to try again. There we go. Fits in like a glove. At this point, we have another small issue. There's our rim of bees on one end of the box. There are a couple ways to deal with this. You can brush them. You can use the smoker in order to get them off that space. But we are going to, again, put the queen excluder down. And I do this by draping it over the excess bees and then bringing the queen excluder down gently. It starts to move the bees inside. On goes the super. And then on goes the inner cover. Next goes the lid. And then finally a rock or a brick in order to keep the lid down. And that's an inspection. Repeat for every single box you have. If you do find your queen, definitely try to capture her in a queen cage like this one. And then, when you're done your inspection, you can release her. Doing so allows you to keep track of her and make sure you don't squish her when you are working your bees.